Joshua Robinson, and I'm the chairperson of the Clark County School District Audit Advisory Committee. It's Tuesday, February 27th, 2024, just a little after 10 a.m. Thank you everyone for joining us, both in the room and elsewhere. Before we get started, the Audit Advisory Committee would like to acknowledge that the land which we're gathering on today is the territorial homeland of the Nuwu Moapa Band of the Paiutes and the Las Vegas Band of the Paiutes. And with that, I'd like to ask everyone to please rise and join me in reciting the national anthem. Or excuse me, the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, everybody. We'll save singing for next meeting. Let's go ahead and move on to item 1.02, which is adoption of today's agenda. I'd like to seek any feedback or comments from the members of the committee in regards to the items on today's agenda, please.
Mr. Chair, are there any items that we need to take out of order today, or are we good as it is?
Ms. Binder, to my knowledge, I believe we'll be taking the agenda in the order as it's presented today. Any other comments? Okay. This is an action item, so I'll seek a motion to adopt today's agenda.
Okay. So moved to adopt our agenda for today as presented.
Second.
Thank you, members. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed, please say nay. Okay, the ayes will take it 4-0. We will proceed with the agenda as stated. Moving on to agenda item 2.01, this is the approval of the minutes. So this will be the discussion and possible action on the approval of the minutes from the last time we gathered together, which was September 27th, 2023. The last meeting's minutes are found in your packet, reference 2.01. Are there any comments from members of the committee in regards to our September 27th, 2023 meeting you'd like to share today?
I have no comments, Mr. Chair. I just want, I guess for the record, because we did have a joint meeting with the Board of Trustees, and those minutes are contained within their meeting minutes. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you for that clarification, Ms. Binder. Apologies for my lack of own clarity. This is the last time that the four of us and Ms. Hammer, who's not present today, met as an independent body. So thank you for the clarification.
And this is Member Thornberry. I'll make a motion to approve.
Member Hilton, second it.
Thank you, members. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, please say nay. Okay, the ayes will take that 4-0. Moving on to agenda item 2.02. This is the update on the Clark County School District Internal Audit Department. This item will be the presentation, discussion, and possible action on work performed by and the status of the Clark County School District Internal Audit Department for the current fiscal year. For this agenda item, I will turn it over to Ms. Jeanette Scott. Ms. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Jeanette Scott, Director of the Internal Audit Department. In your packet, you do have my brief update of where we are as of February 13th of this year, so just a little over halfway through the year. Reports that have been issued, as well as where we are with our other work. So you can see for the bond fund, in the construction audits, we've got budget versus actual and then the energy management audit. Both are in process. The budget versus actual is in the fieldwork phase, and the energy management audit is in the preliminary survey phase. We did issue the Farron Elementary School replacement construction audit back in December. And then for follow-ups in that area, we've had one report issued, and then one follow-up is currently in process. And then we have the consulting project of the site-funded projects for the construction area, and that is in the draft report phase, and so that will be issued very soon. General fund side, of course, our school audits are always ongoing. We've issued 84 reports since the beginning of the fiscal year, and our charter school review has just recently been completed, and that has been turned over to the charter school office. And for the department audits, you can see we've got more in progress than we actually have ever had, so we're really excited about that. We've got our custodial supply order procedures audit, which is in also the draft report phase. We are just waiting for the response, so that should be issued very shortly as well. Our athletics department review and our contracts at the school level, as well as accounts payable process review, are all in the fieldwork phase. And then we have our technology information system services. We're going to look at the inventory process for physical devices That will be starting this month. In fact, I think the auditors, that's going to be a combination of bond fund and general fund areas. And so those two auditors have already started doing some preliminary work on that. And then our health services review and our food service cafeteria processes are also in preliminary survey phase. We did issue our internal assessment back in August, our famous follow-up, and then our reviews and trainings are obviously always ongoing. Special requests, we had one audit issued back in January. So that's where we're at as of mid-February, and then, of course, it's that time of year coming up. I will be starting my risk assessment probably end of March, early April, and put together the audit plan and the risk assessment for the next meeting. So any questions that you have on anything?
This is Member Thornberry. Just in taking a look, a suggestion for possible future performance audits is taking a look at risk related to cybersecurity and IT, incorporating, potentially one audit for the upcoming fiscal year if your risk assessment warrants that, and then looking at maybe something HR policy related in terms of your public safety, CCSD, PD, internal affairs review process, our investigations being conducted in accordance with the department policy and best practice standards such as CALIA standards. In those two hot topic areas, I think there's been community interest, and having the independent reassurance from internal audit over those areas may give some assurance to the board members, the board of trustees, and the public, as best internal audit could do.
Hey, Scott, thank you for the update. A couple of things I'd like to comment on. The first question will be, you've issued 84 reports thus far this year, an impressive feat. How are you trending against what you anticipated doing by this time of the year and towards the end of this fiscal year?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we are actually ahead of where we were last year as far as the number of audit reports issued. Definitely that is attributable to our two new coordinator ones, as well as our co-sourcing, but actually mostly the coordinator ones have really stepped up and taken to the internal audit process. So we are definitely ahead of last year, and I think we'll probably end up even ahead of where I anticipated for the entire year.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. That's a great update. You actually took the next question right away because I was curious to hear how your new staff was going. I know at our last meeting you had a very happy update in regards to hiring and co-sourcing, so I'm glad to hear that that's been effective for your team. And last but not least, I would be remiss if I didn't also point out that Ms. Scott provides this committee with her performance analytics on a quarterly basis, and her team continues to excel in regards to how she deals with her stakeholders, and that is evident from the survey she sends them, constantly saying her team acts with professionalism, has an appropriate audit cycle, timing, decorum, everything you like to see from an internal audit department. So again, thank you, Ms. Scott, for your team and your professionalism. You're welcome. Any other comments from the committee on agenda item 202?
Member Thornberry, one additional comment. So in regards to the findings, have you felt management's response and action plans to the findings on these reports has been adequate? Is there anything that should be escalated to our attention or that we could assist you on?
So anything that I feel you would need to see, I would send to you. We have not had anything thus far this year that I have felt necessary to send to you. As far as regular school bank related. And yes, management's response, they are very responsive to the items in the report. The school principals that have to respond to the individual items in the reports, as well as their supervisors at the region level, have been very responsive as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Member Binder, so a couple meetings ago, just since we're on a general discussion item, and we have our CFO, Mr. Gowdy, with us, I had asked a question at the board meeting about kind of an agenda item that was to streamline purchases for like construction bond stuff for projects that are either on school sites or that are being managed by bond oversight. And then so I didn't know if Mr. Gowdy and you, Ms. Scott, could just explain how those funds, when they're spent, kind of roll into your audit plan, like if they're by, how we do projects, or if they would wind up somewhere being a special request, or if they, just get put down into, like the building department, you know what I mean? Because it's just, I know Gowdy, I'm sorry, Mr. Gowdy knows what I'm referring to.
Thank you, Jason Getty, for the record. I'm just looking for a little clarification. Which specific types of projects? I think I missed that piece to try and understand how they roll in.
Sure. So that agenda item had, I think, eight, nine. It had a list of things. It was everything from like playgrounds to construction projects to, school improvement projects.
Great, Jason Getty for the record. So you're referring to the statutory reserve bond account. And so just for a little history, so what that really consists of is we issue bonds totaling approximately $450 million a year. 400 million are general obligation bonds, which we use to build schools, finish schools, modernize schools, et cetera. The other is primarily to buy buses, white fleet, technology equipment, things of that nature. When we issue bonds, when we go to the Debt Management Commission, the board, oversight panel on school facilities, we are very conservative with our estimates on revenue as well as with interest rates. Thus, we tend to have significantly more revenues available than ultimately needed at the end. So what that does, that results in some excess in our statutory bond reserve account. And we've set up a process that we've designated projects that the board approves, and ultimately we then are able to work on a more expedited process. A lot of what's going on right now is the replacement of turf to save, I don't know how many millions of gallons, or 50 or 100 millions of gallons of water. Playgrounds was the initial piece that we put in there because we were tired of seeing elementary schools with playgrounds shut down. The other large ones that are in there, we've got a large lighting project and a number of other components, HVAC, things of that nature. And so these are what will tend to be smaller projects that really don't fall into the regular bond for school pieces, but are still capital. And so what Member Binder is talking about is how they roll into audits, and it ultimately would depend on how the funds are spent. So if they are spent specifically at schools on specific projects, then they may or may not be picked up. But keep in mind, internal audit does samples. And additionally, Ms. Scott and I can talk about expanding that as potentially a separate audit component, because we are starting to spend more money in those categories to maybe sample some of those pieces as well, but we haven't discussed a specific plan.
Thank you very much for that. It was very much needed, I think, and I also want to say thank you because our elementary school, our new playground is getting ready to be available to the kids come Monday. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Binder. Thank you, Mr. Gowdy. Any other comments from this committee in regards to agenda item 2.02? Okay, hearing none, agenda item 2.02, update on the Clark County School District Internal Audit Department, is also an action item, so I'll seek a motion on this item, please.
Member Thornberry, I'll make a motion to approve.
Member Binder, I'll second.
Thank you, members. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, please say nay. Thank you, members. The ayes will take that 4-0. We will move on to agenda item 2.03, which is the information on the Ethics Points Incident Management System. For this item, I'll turn it over to Mr. Jason Gowdy.
Thank you, Jason Gowdy, for the record. Luckily, we've got Chris Greathouse in the house, and so he will be able to provide the detail. I wanted to give a brief update on the two open items that we had discussed during the last meeting. One of them was related to an allegation of misuse of school-generated funds at a school. Ms. Scott has confirmed that this school was one of the schools that was included in their most recent school-generated fund audits, and that there were no significant issues noted. The second item related to an allegation that the Math and English Department were utilizing special education funding inappropriately. Again, through the review, there was no significant, or there was nothing noted that would confirm that there were inappropriate use of funds as it related to that allegation as well. So I wanted to close those two out. And now, with your permission, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Greathouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Mr. Gowdy. For the time period that we're looking at is September 16, 2023 through January 11, 2024. We had roughly 94 reports or incidences reported to the Ethics Point Incident Management System. Of those 94, there was 5 of interest to this committee, 4 falling under accounting, auditing, and internal finance controls for the period. One was an allegation that the principal approved the use of grant funds and inappropriately transferred grant monies within the school budget. This was already being investigated by my department. Chris Greathouse for the record, Employee Management Relations. This was already being investigated by EMR prior to the report coming into Ethics Point, and the outcome is still pending for our department. The next was an allegation that an employee's time was being entered wrong into the human capital management system. We did not have a follow-up from that principal. There are times where we reach out several times to our principals asking for follow-ups, and sometimes we get them, sometimes we don't. At this point, we haven't had a follow-up from that principal. The next case was an allegation that the principal was not paying teachers their agreed rate for professional learning community time, PLC time. Again, there was no response from the region at the time on the case for an update. The next one was an employee alleging that the cheerleading team was doing no cheer tasks, but was that parents were being asked for money for all kinds of different things for that cheerleading team. When it was investigated by the region, the case was to be unfounded, which is most of the time, a lot of our cases are unfounded. And then the last one was under embezzlement. Employees, you have to realize, get to select the category when they go into Ethics Point. So this person reported that she had mail sent to the school site and that administration had opened her mail. When it was reviewed by the region, it was unsubstantiated. So those were the 5 cases that fell within this committee's interest. You have any questions?
Member Thornberry, question for you. So a couple of times you had indicated lack of response. What is your plan to establish an SLA? I would imagine a response time should be no more than 48, 72 hours from the time your department sends that to a principal before calling them in to meet.
So there's no required time period for them to call us. What happens is the report comes into our department. We review it. We determine who it needs to be sent to. 99% of them are sent to the regions because it's typically an allegation against a principal or a assistant principal at a school site. So the Ethics Point is forwarded to that region. The region then, there is a body email that goes with the Ethics Point that tells them that they need to look at the Ethics Point. They need to follow the normal investigative process to look into the case, and then to report back to our department the outcome of the Ethics Point so that we can close that Ethics Point. What we're doing on a 30-day rotation is I have an analyst that's assigned. What she'll do is 30 days out, she will start sending reminders to that region superintendent. So we'll send a reminder out, we'll wait, usually another reminder will be sent out in a few days. After sending 2, 3, 4 reminders asking for an update on the case, then we deem the case to be closed out. At that point, timelines have usually elapsed for anything as far as discipline to occur within the school district. We have timelines within all the negotiated agreements. We are not the supervisors of the regions, so we can't direct them in the work to do. All we can do is encourage them to investigate and to get back to us on a status of where the case is at.
So for future meetings, when we cover ethics point, I think that for the public and for the board, I would want to, in being the board that advises on these sort of matters to our Board of Trustees, if there was an area or region where that leadership, wasn't compliant and now the person can't be held accountable, that would be a critical lack of leadership over that area that I think the board would want to know, and having conversations with executive management as to why there was anything deficient. Wouldn't want to say that, if there's an established policy that's being followed, that's great. And so I wouldn't say, we should create a whole bunch of SLAs specific to ethics point, because, ethics point, a lot of times it's misconceived that because it's an ethics point, it's somehow escalated higher, and there's a sense of urgency that's may not be a true sense of urgency. So you want to follow established policies. But if your team is having to remind executives 2-3 times, as you indicated, one reminder is too many. I think, and I know they have a lot going on, but we would hate to see where there is a lack of controls, in any one of those categories. So the accounting, the embezzlement, misuse of assets would be, of interest, and all of these are important. But the concern that someone's not getting back to you and at a regional level would be concerning, in my opinion. But I do want to thank you for including this in the agenda. It was something that I had referenced before, and I think the internal audit team, as this gets more established and you refine the process for intaking these, you may find some a good way to incorporate this in your overall risk assessment, to be able to get some audits that are productive and adding value once the program's out there more, and the team is taking it seriously, and it's moving fast.
Member Binder, thank you for that. So ethics point is, I think, still fairly new. I mean, it's only been around a couple years, because when I first was appointed, it was in our bylaws, but we weren't receiving the presentations. And so it did take some time to, start bringing them to the table and getting these reviews. But I would like to turn your statement back over to staff for an explanation of why we receive these presentations. And then I think Ms. Scott could probably answer why, in the grand scheme of these, not necessarily hearing back on them does or does not affect an audit or an area of concern that's reported.
So, Member Binder, members of the committee, Jeanette Scott, Director of Internal Audit. The only cases that are forwarded to internal audit are the ones that we would directly need to deal with. So a lot of these other ones we don't even hear about in the audit department. Everything that is turned over to us, we do perform an audit on. So do that. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, Member Thornberry, I think it, to my fellow board member, it did. We just want to make sure, and in most of these, there, potentially, just as long as that information is coming over to internal audit on the accounting, embezzlement, and misuse of services, they can take a look at overall controls, and that assessment may be just reviewing it quickly, because it may be a one-off individual that violated the control that's already established and is standard across the district, and it was a one-off performance or judgment issue on that, or conduct on that one person. So thank you for that, and that would be in line with what I would expect to be seeing an internal audit department do and focus on as it relates to internal controls.
Member Binder, as many know, I take a lot of interest in school-generated funds because, as was just discussed, like with a cheer team raising money from parents or the community, those monies go into like coaches, athletic departments, things like that. And so when we look back on our status sheets that Ms. Scott provides, when they go in and do like the athletics department review, those are things that are audited in those audits, correct?
Member Binder, so in the school banks, the school activity funds, that's where we audit such things like the football account, the basketball account, things like that. The overall athletics department audit is more of the procedures for the games, the ticketing, how the funds are used district-wide. So the majority of those are looked at during the school audits.
Sure. So, because as any sports parent knows, a lot of money can sometimes flow through our teams. And I'm not sure if our newer members are aware, but we've gone to predominantly online ticket sales. There's an app for that now. So they're not handling cash at the gate anymore like they used to. And we have historically spoken about how much time that saves our internal audit department on some of those audits. And I think historically, just in my time sitting, I've only seen a few reports that they've issued surrounding school-generated funds, and the issues have been corrected pretty quickly. So I guess with that, I will just look forward to our next meeting and see if we get an update on just that one about the grant fund. But even with that, the grant department also has historically, is explained to me, has its own like system of reviewing and processing the grant funds, which I'm sure staff could explain a little more. They have a different standard that's even a little higher than our own internal audit department, if my memory serves me correct.
The grants department, yes, they have their procedures that they have to follow. I couldn't tell you honestly if it's more stringent than what we do or not. Mr. Gowdy might know that.
Yes, Jason Getty for the record. So we really have two grants departments. We have the revenue side, which they have their own compliance components, ensuring that the applications and the types of expenditures would meet the criteria of each grant. And then additionally, we have our grants fiscal services, which is the secondary point where they get reimbursed and pay out and things of that nature. And I guess to the point is, I don't know that the procedures are more stringent. Those are just the procedures that are required to get it done, and then the internal audit department would tactically be auditing against those procedures. One, ensuring that they are in compliance with the grant itself, any laws, et cetera. So I wouldn't say one's more stringent. It's just one is done on a very daily basis, and the other's done on a sample basis to check that those controls are working effectively.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. And in my tenure here, we have never had to review one of those policies, so, and we've never seen a report come out of any of that. So I think that's good news.
Member Thornberry for a question for internal audit. As part of the audit, as any audit of professional standards, you're taking a look at the fraud considerations as part of that audit. In the presentation, so it triggered a question here as we're covering ethics in these various cases. In the report provided, did any of those audits for, let's say within your last fiscal year, result in, let's say, a fraud referral or a potential fraud, waste, and abuse concern to leadership to further investigate? Do you track that in your numbers, or how would that be reported, or how would we have visibility, if any, into that that component of the IIA standard?
So Member Thornberry, any reports or any investigations that we do that involve major internal control issues or fraud, you do get a copy of. Anything that we investigate, we complete that process to the point that it's turned over to EMR and school police. And then they take it from there and complete that investigation, because then that's where the employee discipline part of it comes in. So, but again, anything that we found related to significant internal controls issues or fraud, you would get a copy of that report.
And the others would just remain outside of the audit report as a personnel confidential
Correct.
issue.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Greathouse, thank you for joining us again today. So I'm going to share an anecdotal question with you, I guess. So I've worked in a number of very large organizations with similar employee sizes to the district. And again, anecdotally, for 4 months, you received just under 100 reports. It seems a little thin, again, anecdotally, but tell me a little bit about your feeling on that. And then secondarily, can you share with the committee how our employees or other stakeholders of the district made aware of the Ethics Point management system?
Chris Greathouse for the record. So I guess I have to take it back, and I think it's been 3 or 4 years that Ethics Point has been around. Our department was assigned the keepers of Ethics Point to get the reports out to who needed to handle those issues. The information is on the school district's website as far as Ethics Point. I do not know of anything other than the initial rollouts of any other communications going out to staff members that Ethics Point is out there. Thin, there was 94. We just hit over 600 this year in the 4th year of it running. And I can honestly say a good 40 to 50% of them are people who are doing repeat ethics points. So we get the mass majority of all of our ethics points are repeats. So we'll come in the morning and I'll have 15 emails saying I have ethics points, and they're all the same school. The person has copy and pasted the same exact thing, and they've gone down the row of choices that you can choose from, and they've selected every single one of them, thinking that it's going to, I guess, get them somewhere further faster, not realizing it's coming to one department and we see them all. So that's been a very popular thing in the last year, is to inundate us with ethics points of the same caliber. Sometimes you can tell that they've come together with team members at their school site or their department site, and there'll be a little bit of nuance, but it's all the same exact thing. And so there's been times we have one person that out of school, I think we're up to maybe 30 of the same exact thing. So the numbers in my view are very, they're not very accurate at all, because we have all of these repeat. A lot of them that we get are, I heard this, I saw this. Those ones are quickly turned around from region soups usually as unfounded, because it's somebody hearing something, they go in, they look at it and aren't able to substantiate it. The big thing is if they don't give enough information either to investigate the claim, it does make it very difficult for region leadership or whoever is assigned to that case to actually investigate. It's no different than a safe voice coming in for students. We typically tell them to use the information that you can get out of it to start your investigation. Sometimes there's just not enough information in the ethics point coming to us to run that investigation. And again, it is upon that administrator that it's sent to actually investigate. They do control their employees at their sites and to do their due diligence of investigating.
Member Thurmby, and in my previous employments I had the task of leading a team that managed the ethics point, ethics line, and so I hear that frustration. Just a couple recommendations that worked before you can comment if you're doing those or not. One was following back up with that person with the if they chose to identify. Or having an anonymous number where they could go back into the ethics point or complaint system and follow up and see the status of their case. And I think that, in the intake form, if you're not doing it, is ask, have you reported this issue before? Do you know when it's reporting? Because that kind of gauges that credibility into the members of the public or that are watching and have an interest in the meetings. Know that the process is you're referring them back to that original investigation. So, making 50 complaints isn't going to get your point across, because an investigation is the investigation and the outcome is the outcome. And so complaining more unless there's new facts and new things to go off of, new evidence, it's not going to get anywhere. And so sometimes that follow through helps with the person in saying without going into specifics, that your complaint was investigated. Here's the findings. If you have new evidence, submit it. Otherwise, just calling them out on their, repeated complaints if you can. That sometimes helps, but I think it's an education process. And then going back to what the chairman was saying for marketing, what I've seen as effective strategies is partnering in with HR, going into new hire orientation for employees, passing out an ethics line card. This way, it kind of balances out, because if you're getting all the, if the system's just being used by the people making numerous complaints over and over again, you're going to keep getting those false readings. You want some good information to come in from that as well. So the marketing is key. From new hire orientation and doing it through any in-services, having your team go out that as much as possible as time permits, getting into orientation staff meetings to re-promote that so you get that balance. But I do feel your frustration in having the repeats, and I know that does skew the numbers.
Member Thornberry, Chris Greathouse. So yes, to the second point, we did start on some of the repeats. We can go into the system, we can do a follow-up with them, and we've told them, this is a duplicate of what has been submitted, and that we're referring to the initial one that was submitted, so that they realize they're submitting the same exact verbiage over and over, is not going anywhere further. And then as far as follow-up, our administrators are made aware in our blanket email to them that if they have any questions of the reporter, that they can send them to us, and that we will push those follow-up questions through the system so that we can get that information out back to them. We're limited on licenses, so everything kind of does flow back through our department, so if our administrators do have questions, they send them to us, we put them back into the system and relay that information back out to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Member Binder. So I have a question and then I think a statement. You said Safe Voice. Is there an overlap? Like because Safe Voice is very widely pushed out to the community to use. If somebody reports, something accounting-wise to Safe Voice, do they then notify you and Ethics Point?
Chris Greathouse for the record. Safe Voice is ran by the state. So the only time we hear of Safe Voice is if a school site gets a report and it is an allegation against an employee. That administrator would reach out to our department. Under state law, we cannot use the Safe Voice as our basis for the investigation. So we'll have them just give us the details and then guide them along the way in that investigation. Ethics Point, I would say, is very different. Safe Voice, anybody really can submit. Ethics Point is more an employee-based system for employees to anonymously report concerns within the school district.
Okay, and then thank you so much for that. And then I just, as everybody was talking, I did go over online because Clark County School District rolled out a website called Let's Talk this past school year. And so on Let's Talk, you can pull it up, and it has little buttons for just about every single department within the district to make it very user-friendly for, parents and community members, that if they need something, they have a one-spot shot, they can put in their info, and even if I didn't hit the right button, it will get routed, to the correct person. And, but I did just cruise on there, and even under the employee section, there is no Ethics Point button for that. So I guess following back up to Member Thornberry's question and then your response about how employees know about it. I know we have had historically other conversations about it, like being readily visible when employees are logging in, like into their employee portal, things like that. But I am just wondering, because for the community, we have put a lot of time and effort into pushing Safe Voice out and Let's Talk. And again, I'm not an employee, so I don't know, if there's just gentle reminders, throughout the, like, beginning or end of school year for just employees to really know that that's there, it's anonymous, and
Chris Greathouse, for the record. To be transparent, our department's only taken on the task of disseminating the information that's come into Ethics Point. I can share this information with the Chief of Human Resources, my boss, so he can take that to Cabinet so they can evaluate the presence of Ethics Point to the employees. The Let's Talk, there wouldn't be really an employee management relations area because our department is an administrative call center for administrators. We're not an employee call center, but I could see how that could be beneficial. So I'll definitely share that with the interim chief of human resources.
okay, great, thank you so much, and I look forward to hearing back on that. And then just one more ask, if it may be in the future, and I would defer to Mr. Chair, that maybe once a year, since we're, going forward in time, and this is, I think, right at about our 4th year of using Ethics Point, that maybe once a year when you come to us, that you have the data of the total amount of reports for the year, the duplicates, just so that, as time moves forward, that, you say we just hit the 600 mark in 4 years, and we have 42,000 employees, as Mr. Chair was saying, that seems very shallow and not a lot. So, and again, I know we've talked about this historically about making sure that employees know it's there and that it is anonymous.
Chris Greathouse, for the record. The reporting system out of Ethics Point is very limited. We can pull it by specific dates. We can do the year-to-date. It would be a manual process to track the duplicatives that are sent into the system. Again, that's something I'm going to have to share with the interim chief for guidance on the manpower that would take to do that.
Okay, I look forward to hearing back on that. It's just, to be transparent with numbers, because if I don't follow this or I don't know, and if I hear, oh my gosh, we have 600 complaints and don't know any details behind that, I would be standing in front of you with tons of questions about that too. So, thank you.
Member Thornberry, last one. I would encourage you on that last topic with the category disposition, working with your vendor IT rep or an Ethics Point. There should be, by adding a drop down going forward in classification, you can classify duplicates. If you created that, then the Ethics Point system will produce better reporting on that if you created that category. Thank you.
Thank you, members, for your commentary. I will agree with Ms. Binder. Mr. Greathouse, it would be a great pleasure to see you annually, just to give this broader update. So thank you. We look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
Okay, agenda item 2.03 was just informational, so I'm going to transition on to agenda item 2.04, which is the update on recently issued Governmental Accounting Standard Board pronouncements. Agenda item 2.04 will be the presentation, discussion, and possible action regarding the accounting, financial reporting, and auditing requirements of recently issued Governmental Accounting Standard Board pronouncements. For this one, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Jason Gowdy.
Thank you, Jason Gowdy, for the record. I'm going to turn it over to Yamin Ju Howard, and she's our local expert on GASBs and is going to walk you through the presentation. Thank you.
Chairman, members of the chamber, Yamin Ju Howard for the record. Thank you for the opportunity for me to present an overview of Governmental Accounting Standards updates from GASB, that is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. My name is Yamin Ju Howard. I'm a CPA and a GL Coordinator 3 of the Accounting Department. I'm responsible for the research and implementation of GASB standards. Here's a summary list of the 4 GASB statements and 2 tentative GASB due process documents we are going to review today. The first two GASB statements, 99 and 100, they are for fiscal years beginning after June 15, 2023, aligning with CCSD's fiscal year 2024. The fiscal years on this slide and later slides, they are referred to our CCSD's fiscal years. As you may know, we often take early implementation of GASB statements. These two GASB statements, 99 and 100, they were adopted early last year for FY 2023. The next two GASB statements, 101 and 102, currently we are actively pursuing the early implementation for current year, fiscal year 2024. And we will also explore briefly on the two tentative GASB due process documents. They are financial reporting module and disclosures and classifications of certain capital assets. Let's begin with GASB 99, which is an omnibus statement. This statement covers various aspects. The other components of these GASB statements were effective before our fiscal year 2024, and they were addressed previously in prior years. And this last piece of this GASB statement addresses the financial guarantees and certain derivative instruments that are non-hedging and non-investment. Currently, CCSD does not have financial guarantees with other third parties. And in addition, we only have one derivative instrument, that is the electricity power purchase agreement with Colorado River Commission. And that instrument is classified as investment derivative. As such, the last piece of GASB 99 does not apply to CCSD. Moving forward to GASB 100 accounting changes and error corrections. These GASB statements provides accounting and financial reporting requirements for accounting changes and error corrections. There are three types of accounting changes: change in accounting principle, change in accounting estimates, and change to and within financial reporting unit, financial reporting entity. The change in accounting estimates are treated prospectively without restatements. However, retroactive restatements are required for the other two types of accounting changes and material error corrections from prior years' accounting errors. The restatement is done by adjusting the beginning balance of government-wide net position, governmental fund balances, and enterprise and proprietary fund net positions wherever applicable. Full disclosures are required for GASB 100 accounting changes and error corrections. The restatement of the beginning balance, as mentioned before, now they're required to present it in a footnote disclosure in tabular format. In addition, GASB 100 also addresses how to present it, the information impacted by GASB 100, how to present them in the required supplementary information and supplementary information section. This GASB statement was adopted early last year for FY 23. We did not notice any change in accounting, any accounting changes for FY 23, and there was also no material error correction for accounting errors from prior years that we need to restate it for our FY 23 effort. But this is the statement that we pay extra attention to and reevaluate and reassess on an annual basis. Like for this year, FY24, we will have a change in accounting principle when we implement the next GASB Statements 101. GASB 101, compensated absences. This is the current GASB statements we're trying to implement. Is quite challenging. We'll get into the implementation steps in the next slide. GASB 101 requires liability to be recognized for two types of leaves. First, cumulated leave that has not been used, and two, leave that has been used but not paid yet. GASB 101 provides three criteria for the first type of the accumulated unused leave. The criteria are: A, the leave is attributable to services already rendered, and B, the leave accumulates, and C, it's more likely than not the leave is going to be used for time off, or the leave is going to be settled upon termination, either paid in cash or settled through non-cash means. Some of the examples of GASB 101 compensated absence are vacation, sick leave, compensated time, and leave pools. And currently, we are actively pursuing early implementation of GASB 101. So the procedures and steps on this slide. Step A, research standards and attend IBAILI and GFOA trainings. We have attended several sessions. IBAILI and GFOA would probably come up more new sessions for us to learn and apply to our implementation. And step B is read CCSD's negotiated employment agreement. We conduct research on both the past and current employment agreements available. Step C, collect historical data on vacation, sick, compensated time, and sick leave pools. That's the step we're currently working on now. We work very closely with the HCM team, the HR, and union to collect this information. Step D, perform data analysis and build new liability estimate schedule. That is our to-do task. We plan to get it done for the interim audit. Step E, finalize workbook and record year-end entries. That is our to-do task for year-end. And step E, revise footnote disclosures and the required supplementary information and supplementary information when applicable. That will be also our year-end task. GASB 102, certain risk disclosures. This is the latest GASB statement issued a couple months ago. These GASB statements requires disclosures on certain concentrations and constraints that make a government vulnerable to risk of substantial impact. The key issue here is how do you assess whether an impact is substantial or not. The GASB does not give us the definition for substantial, for significant, or material. And fortunately, we have the help from IBAILI. During December 2023 training course, the IBAILI partner provided a 10% benchmark for GASB 102 assessment. That is whether an event associated with the concentration or constraint triggers a 10% or more increase in the government's total revenue. Did I say it wrong? A 10% or more decrease in the government's total revenue or a 10% or more increase in the government's total expenditure. Besides, I believe during GFOA committee session in January last month, GASB director brought up a higher 20% benchmark for the GASB 102 assessment. Both IBLE partner and the GASB director commented that GASB 102 disclosures are rare cases. As we are taking steps towards early implementation this year, so far we assess there will be no GASB 102 disclosures, but we will finalize the evaluation at year end. Now we're going to look at two tentative GASB due process documents. Tentative GASB 103 financial reporting model. It was initially proposed by GASB in June 2020, approximately 4 years ago. Last year in June 2023, GASB voted to drop a significant session for the change in governmental funds out of the project. A final statement is going to be issued in April this year, 2024. And this project is a large project, covers various aspects as listed on this slide here. And we will delve deeper into the learning and research once the statement is officially released. Moving on to tentative GASB 104, disclosures and classification of certain capital assets. This tentative GASB standards establishes criteria in determining whether capital assets should be classified as assets held for sale. And it also added additional footnote disclosures requirement for capital assets held for sale, intangible assets, and lease assets. Having been accepted to GFOA Accounting, Auditing, and Financial Reporting Committee last year in 2023, I participated in the committee's discussion sessions on this tentative GASB standards and contributed comments on the exposure draft. From my perspective, it seems reasonably straightforward to interpret and implement this tentative GASB standard. We will need to come up with a threshold for the capital held for sale classification. But the footnote disclosure part doesn't seem to be too complicated. We, the accounting GL team, keeps a comprehensive GASB checklist that we update and perform review on the applicability of GASB statements on an annual basis. In addition, we'll also send out district-wide wire notification and department memos on GASB to seek and collect and comply information on practice changes or new significant transactions that might impact the applicability of GASB statements. And so far this year, we have sent out those district-wide notifications and department memos in November 2023, and we perform our review on the first rounds of response from schools and departments. And we also updated our GASB checklist, adding new statements to the checklist and checking individual each statement status, whether it's still active or is superseded. And we also performed a preliminary review on the applicability for each active GASB statement. We will continue our GASB review process for the interim and year-end audit. That concludes my slide presentation. I tried to practice this presentation at home with my daughter. The whole time she was daydreaming, thinking about the Great Gatsby. And I hope you enjoy the Great Gatsby over here. Thank you.
Well, I think practice makes perfect. Thank you for that very comprehensive update. I'm going to open. I have 2 quick questions for you. You may or may not know the answer to. In regards to GASB 101, again, I know you're in preliminary research phase. Do you imagine this will be a very material change to the liability related to this new pronouncement?
Yeah, there are some major changes. One is the accrual of the sick leave liabilities. Under the old GASB statement, like sick leave liabilities are accrued for the sick leave that are probably to be settled or paid upon termination. Now we need to add the part that the sick leave that are likely to be used for time off in future years. So there's a lot of data analysis of the historical data. We need to come up with the percentage, the statistical percentage to calculate and compute that part of sick leave liability. And also we are adding the new compensated absence items, the sick leave pools and the compensated time. And the sick leave pools currently, we are reviewing the agreement, the employment agreement for the terms for each group's sick leave pool policies. We have to collecting those data from different resources. Like the HR provided us the sick leave pool for information for the police officers group and the support group. And we collected the information from the union for our admin group, but we're still pending for the police admin and the what's the last teachers? Yes, thank you. Group, yeah. So it is the most challenging task for us now.
Sure, I imagine so. Thank you so much. And my last question before I'll turn it over is in regards to GASB 102. I'm probably hypersensitive to this because I work in a public company environment, and I'm sure you're aware that the SEC has said recently disclosures around particularly cyber events are a hot topic, and companies are weighing what do we have to disclose and by when and what is material. And I know you're already starting to tackle many of those questions. But I'm curious, in the unlikely event that you have to make a 102 related disclosure, will that only be as part of an annual financial statement, or could there be circumstances that require some sort of out of period disclosure to a regulator or even to the community for that matter?
If I'm trying to answer to the best of my knowledge, like GASB 102 for events that we are aware currently and also within 1 year of our financial statement date. And this GASB 102 does not cover all those risk disclosures, and it relates to certain concentrations and the constraints that triggers that substantial impact.
Understood. Oh, Mr. Gowdy.
Thank you, Jason Gowdy, for the record. So to address it, I'll let her address the regulatory component to it. That's not my world anymore. But from a community component, obviously, any of the items such as cyber attacks and things of that nature that are material to the district and the community, we work to communicate out as much information as possible. Sometimes with some of the attacks, we can't communicate too much, and other items as well. So we will continue to follow that protocol of communicating out to the public as seen appropriate. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Gaddy. I'd like to open the floor to other members of this committee in regards to agenda item 2.04. Okay, hearing, oh, sorry, Ms. Binder, apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for that presentation. I get accused all the time of being a data nerd, too. So if your daughter was singing The Great Gatsby as she was doing this, imagine what I did when I first saw the acronym and learned all about it. So to stay with 101, is our HCM system sufficient to support this accounting change, is my first question.
Yamin Juhao, for the record, we are working with the HCM team now, and so far we can see that HCM reports are very give us a lot of information, and actually we are asking them to code it and edit more data that we need. For instance, the forfeited vacation or sick leave upon termination, vacation does not get forfeited, but like for some admins that accumulates vacations over the cap of 85 days, and then there's some small forfeiture of vacation. Like those information currently they're not in HCM reports. We are talking to them. They are trying to add in a new formula or coding to see if they could provide those essential information for us.
Thank you. And so far, right now, are you guys on a path to be able to complete this before it's we fully implement it?
That's our objective. But hey, I'm not the HCM expert to give that the absolute answer. You know.
Yeah, because I actually wrote down what kind of burden is this creating on that side of it. Okay, so thank you. And then if we'll, do have one more. I was trying to stay in order with our chair. But I put a lot of notes in here. Can you clarify for me on 102? You said that Ida Bailey, because the government didn't give you guys definitions of the concentrations or constraints, you mentioned a 10% benchmark, but then as you continued on, you mentioned a 20%?
Yamin Juhao, for the record, I had a discussion with the Gatsby director of, what is his title? Director of Technical Activity and Research, Alan. When I talked to him, I said, during this training session that I believe brought up 10% benchmark for Gatsby 102 assessment. And Alan commented that, I was thinking about even higher benchmark, 20% would be appropriate also.
But that was just conversation. Yeah.
Yes, because
okay.
even I believe the partners, when they give trainings, they will say, hey, this is not authoritative. Authoritative resource for Gatsby standards are only the ones on the Gatsby website and officially published statements, and even the implementation guides, they are not authoritative, you know.
Okay, thank you so very much.
May I add another comment? It's really depends on the agreement of the preparer and the auditors to determine the applicability of the Gatsby statement. And also it applies to like materiality, and like our threshold, for accounting policies, we will draft up technical memos and submit to the auditor and come to a common consent for Gatsby 102 and other Gatsby statements.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, because sometimes when the public's listening in, they hear numbers, and then it comes up in the future, and they don't quite understand that either. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Minder and other members. Before moving on to public comment on this item, I would like to clarify no other questions or concerns from the members of this committee. Great. Okay. Before we vote on agenda item 2.04, I'd like to bring to the attention that we have a request from a member of the public to speak on agenda item 2.04. As a friendly reminder, the member of the public will have 3 minutes to speak on this agenda item, and please keep all comments within the scope of the update on recently issued Gatsby pronouncements. With that in mind, I'd like to call to the podium Mr. David Gomez II, who has requested to speak on agenda item 2.04. Mr. Gomez.
David Gomez, without a piece of mind, president. Oh. I can speak loud. Okay. Sorry about that. Again, David Gomez, for the record, Nevada Peace Alliance president, president of Wake Up, former president of Wake Up. Marta Lewis, former deputy director of education for LULAC, the largest Latino organization, independent Latino representation in our country, member of legislation on the federal level, and public level here, and then also a father of 7 children. You know, I do a lot of research. I own an accounting firm. So I have a lot of people that work for me. We do a lot of taxes for people. We do a lot of enrollment agent issues. We do a lot of different type of, you know, agent issues with different people. But, you know, the IRS requests that when we do something as an accounting firm, to be efficient. And there's a due diligence law. We have to follow that. There's no way to get around it. I can't tell somebody, bring me a piece of paper. And I'm getting to the point with Gatsby, but tell me to bring me a piece of paper, and I'm going to acknowledge that piece of paper as your burden of proof. That's not going to work. I'm going to get audited. My office is going to get audited. My P10 holder is going to get audited. Everybody's going to be in trouble. So, you know, when I'm looking on the CCSD website for Gatsby, the last time I saw any updates was in 2018. So I'm kind of wondering, because I saw numbers going down. So I said only 6 things came up for Gatsby, and it was 15, 16, 17, 18. Now, I'm not going to blame Mr. Godey here, because he wasn't always in charge of that. But somehow something went in place where we had consistency down the line. But then when we hit 18, now we're in 24, and there's nothing there. I'm looking around, I'm looking for the presentation, I'm looking for anything prior to this conversation here that maybe suggests that in 2022, 3 or 4 now, that there's something there, but there isn't. So how am I supposed to look at some of these things if nothing is there for the public to view? And then you go to CCSD website and you type in Gatsby, and it will just only give you 6. It'll populate 6 only. That's it. It won't do any more. So somebody somewhere is not keeping this transparent. And I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but I am making a statement that if we're going to have meetings publicly with audit advisories and everybody else, that this information, whether it was a prior meeting, because the last public input was in 2016. What the heck? there hasn't been no public input since then. So I'm very concerned on how transparency is working on this matter and how the firm maybe not be catching up with exactly what we need done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez. And before we vote on this item, Ms. Binder does have an additional inquiry, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 8 of 12, under 103, to the left of the slide, where we were discussing that we're going to be issuing a final statement to be issued in April 2024. I was not paying attention in 2020, so could someone just explain to me how that 2020 exposure draft versus what's coming up in a statement affects anything, or if it doesn't, or if it's just, mandatory statements that we have to make, or how do those two relate to each other?
Jason Gotti for the record. So, and I'm going to attempt to answer this and let the expert chime in. So the way it typically works in the accounting world is that there's an exposure draft that goes out for proposed accounting literature, and it works on the FASB side as well as the GASB side. And so that was issued. And then there are comments that are submitted by users, government agencies, and companies. And so then they go through another process of then creating a separate draft. And I believe, and this is what I'm looking for her clarification as to what exactly meant, but I believe that this means that a final statement, a new GASB statement is planned to be issued on April 24th, April of 2024, based off the exposure draft, any changes that get changed in the amendments, as well as the comments that were made. Okay, I'm getting a heads up, so that's it. Thank you.
Yamin Chu Howell for the record, and Jason explained it well. Yeah, it's kind of like a due process of the GASB, and yeah, when they issue, before they issue an official statement, they will publish the draft, exposure draft, to collect inputs and opinions and information from the public. Then it goes through, the boards will go through the discussion session. They will take in the information they collect and discuss and see what they had to consider the cost and what benefit of the information that affect the government's accounting practices. Or the like this is a large project, so they've been a discussion over years. And fortunately, that part that's really challenging the governmental funds, the session was taken out on the projects, then we do not need to worry about it for now. So then at this point, it looks like it will come out this year. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for that, because that's like a 4-year process. So, and I know historically we do talk about this every year, any changes or whatnot. So this is my 3rd year. So 3 years in a row, we have thoroughly discussed these things. I'm an American, and I like instant gratification. So when you're telling me that something's been revised over 4 years, I'm not getting my American gratification. But I like to hear that it does take that long, because I'm sure it's very tedious with details and practice and application. So just my last question is, when you're going through amendments or drafts and taking comments for your final statement, how is it solicited to those users or the department? I mean, like, who participates in submitting comments that go towards the final plan or final statement?
Jason Getty for the record. I'll start just from a high-level perspective, and then I'll let finish up. So when GASB or FASB, right, issue exposure drafts, it goes out to the accounting community. It's publicly made. We also, virtually every company of larger size obviously has a regular way of reviewing websites for all this information. And then from once the exposure draft is kind of the first step, they'll actually talk about it prior to exposure drafts as well. And then they actually have a formal process for submitting commentary. And there's a lot of industry-based organizations that assist. We also consult with our external accounting firms and audit firms because they obviously have a vested interest in understanding and providing guidance as well as other governmental agencies. And so those then get accumulated. And as I mentioned, there is a lot of coordination between organizations depending on the gravity and financial reporting. A financial reporting model is a very large change. And so that's kind of the overall process. And I'll turn it over and let her describe a little bit more.
Yamin Chu Howell for the record. For my side, I was accepted to the GFOA Accounting Auditing Financial Reporting Committee last year. And that organization is very up to date to GASB's standards and due process documents. So they will notify me, hey, there's a new GASB tentative due process documents. We are going to have a discussion and meeting, and also we'll work together to draft the comments on the exposure drafts. So that's really helpful because then I get kind of like firsthand. And also from this committee, there are lots of other aspects and experience accounting, governmental accounting professionals. And before the statement comes out, already have learning and information inputs from this group. That's my ending comments.
Thank you again for the comprehensive update. Agenda item 2.04 does require this committee's action, so I will seek a motion on the update on recently issued Governmental Accounting Standard Board pronouncements.
Member Thornberry will make a motion to approve.
Member Hilton, second.
Thank you, members. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, please say no. Okay, thank you all. The ayes have it 4-0. We will transition on to agenda item 2.05, which is the review of the Clark County School District's internal control environment. This item will be the presentation, discussion, and possible action on Clark County School District Board of Trustees Audit Advisory Committee's responsibility to review updates to the internal control environment, including assignment of authority and responsibilities as prescribed by our bylaws and calendar of the committee. For this one, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Jason Gowdy.
Thank you, Jason Gowdy, for the record. So today we're going to talk about the internal control environment. For those of you who have been around a while, this will be very familiar to you. Luckily, our internal control environment does not change drastically on a year-by-year basis, which is actually a very good thing. So the first piece is really just to talk about the comprehensive framework of internal control overall. So as you know, internal control is a process affected by a board of directors, management, or other personnel that is designed to provide reasonable assurance regarding the achievement of objectives in the following categories: effectiveness and efficiency of operations, reliability of financial reporting, and compliance with applicable laws. And I do always like to point out the box in the bottom left is that one inherent limitation of internal control is that a certain degree of risk will always be unavoidable because of cost-benefit considerations. There's no such thing as risk-free. So the next slide is talking about the COSO framework, the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations Internal Control Framework components. So you have a control environment, you have risk assessment, control activities, information and communication, and monitoring activities, and we'll go through those in a little bit more detail. So the first is the control environment, and this is ultimately the foundation upon which an effective system is built. and operated within the organization and essentially strives to demonstrate a commitment to integrity and ethical values, oversight, responsibility, establish structure, authority, responsibility, demonstrate a commitment to competence, and enforce accountability. And more specifically, the Clark County School District establishes tone at the top regarding the importance of internal control and its integrity and ethical values, and this is primarily done through policies and regulations. Establishes organizational structures, reporting lines, and procedures, reinforces expectations and accountability, and then also, as we mentioned before, implemented ethics point incident management system, which helps. So the next area is the risk assessment, and this really establishes and maintains an effective ongoing process to identify, analyze, and manage risks. It identifies and assesses changes that could significantly impact the system of internal control. It prioritizes risks so that are managed within defined tolerance thresholds without being over-controlled. This is the cost-benefit analysis we talked about. So we talk about establishing risk tolerances, prioritizing these risks, implement internal controls, assess exposure to risks that control-related policies and procedures are adequate. And a lot of this is done in coordination with our internal audit department. As you've seen, as they go through their risk assessment on audits, this is a lot what myself and other team members participate in. So control activities, these are the actions that management establishes through policies and procedures to achieve objectives and respond to risks. It is performed at all levels within the organization. So when we talk about the most effective or preventative, and this is the upfront controls, we have training, setting up unique users and passwords, authorizations and approvals, and ultimately segregation of duties. Detective, monthly, quarterly, and yearly reconciliations, the internal external audits, monitoring of transactions, ethics point incident management system also falls within detective. And then we also have automated, which kind of go in coordination with preventative. At least they certainly can be, and automated can be any type, I guess. But a lot of it is workflow paths built into systems like SAP, PeopleSoft, which require certain approvals and things move through the system automatically. Thresholds, limitations being established, and also creating and tracking data changes. So talking about information and communication, it's obviously very important, and the continual process of providing, sharing, obtaining relevant information that is timely, accessible, and allows for control actions. So quality and effectiveness of information is key. We both have internal and external communication. So talking a little bit about the flow of communication, obviously it goes upward and it goes downward. It goes across organizational lines, it goes into the district, and goes out of the district. The types of things that are communicated, policies, procedures, standards, expectations, initiatives, changes, feedback, and then the way that we communicate in person, email, phone, Google Suite, weekly wire, which is now changed, so I need to change that. It's actually the wire. District-wide memos, newsletter, open book, social media, board docs. It's a lot of different ways. Monitoring activities. These are the periodic or ongoing evaluations that are used to determine whether components of internal control are present and functioning, and internal control deficiencies are and make sure that internal control deficiencies are communicated timely to those responsible for taking corrective action. So when you look at like some evaluations, we talk about checklists, monitoring reports, reconciliation, supervisory review, internal audit, external audit, audit advisory committee, and then the internal control audits that we had done in the past. So the external audit, just to give a little bit on that, Eide Bailey is our auditor. They are an independent auditor that performs our financial statement audit of the annual comprehensive financial report, which is required by law. It's required to ensure financial statements are not materially misstated. That goes back to the point that nothing could be perfectly accurate. And materiality is a concept, an amount large enough to cause an investor or user of the financial statements to view the financial statements or financial condition of the entity differently. The auditors are required to report material weaknesses and significant internal control deficiencies, which they do on an annual basis. And just some information, Eide Bailly is a nationally recognized independent certified public accounting firm. Independence means the auditor has no financial interest in the organization, is not an employee or part of management of the organization, and is an objective third party. And then we just list some of the other audits and clients of Eide Bailly at the bottom. So internal audit, I know that you guys are very familiar because we do get regular updates from Ms. Scott. The internal audit department's mission is to independently evaluate the effectiveness of the district's activities and to enhance and protect organizational value by providing risk-based and objective assurance, advice, and insight. I know we've been through this, but the primary audits of audit that are departments, which would be audit universe and risk assessment, schools, obviously this is a high priority, construction, another high priority, and then request follow-up other, and then assigned based off total audit hours. And as Ms. Scott mentioned earlier, we've expanded our internal audit department in a couple of different ways. We've been able to add some newer staff so that we have a little bit of growth opportunities. The good piece about the internal audit department is that it's historically been staffed with very experienced seasoned auditors, which makes it very easy to adapt and address a lot of different issues. But we didn't have enough at the beginning to kind of bring in some people to make sure we had some growth. And then additionally, in the last few years, we added senior auditors as well to kind of, again, have a better progression. The last piece is we have performed some outsourcing to primarily address our school banking audits, which are much more compliance-based than operational in nature, and that frees up our very experienced auditors to go do things that can provide a lot more value to the district. And then here's just a brief overview of the other types of audits. We as a large government agency are audited in a number of different ways. We have the single audit, which is our government grants, federal programs audit, basically. We also have a financial statement audit of Vegas PBS. We have the PERS, which is the Public Employee Retirement System audit. We have our Medicaid Administrative Claiming audit. We have grant financial monitoring audits, monitoring visits, the Nevada Department of Agriculture, also State of Nevada enrollment audits that are done quarterly. And then most recently, the State of Nevada Legislative Council Bureau audit, which is initial audit to be performed for 8/31 of 26, which is probably about the time I believe that they'll conclude. I'm assuming, but I don't know yet, that we may have interim reports or information that may be shared, but I don't know that yet. So the last piece, I know this is a hot topic, and it is because it is impacting virtually every large business, probably worldwide and certainly most significantly in the United States. So the education sector, we know, as well as many other sectors, are being targeted by cyber attacks. There were approximately over 1,600 publicly disclosed cyber attacks on schools between 2016 and 22. So we have taken some additional steps. So we've reset passwords. That was for all Google accounts. We've modified security settings. We strengthened login credentials and expanded the use of two-factor authentication. We've provided incident hotlines to respond to questions. We've secured the Google environment better by limiting access. We've notified and cooperated with local law enforcement, and also we collaborate on a regular basis with our cybersecurity specialists to assess each specific incident. And so we have continued to enhance our controls. As we've mentioned a number of times, we are not well funded as it relates to school districts across the nation and states, which certainly affects our ability to enhance controls because there's a cost to every control. Additionally, we don't technically have a revenue aspect to loss of operations, and so therefore the portion of funding in a private sector may be greater than what you might see in a governmental sector as well. It doesn't make it any less important, but it does change the financial model a little bit. So with that, we have tried to utilize resources the best we can, identify other resources. There are some grants that have come through that help us, and working through the growing challenge that I think this will continue to become over time. Additionally, we do work on the cyber insurance and insurance policy that we have to best manage risk as well. And with that, I'll turn it over. Oh, yep, that's it. Turn it over. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gowdy, again for a comprehensive update. Are there any questions from members of the committee in regards to Agenda Item 205?
Member Thornberry, glad to see the cybersecurity focus. Quick question in regards to controls. Does, and maybe you can or can't answer the question, in terms of an IT cyber risk registry, is your IT team actively involved, and is internal audit being partnered in on those discussions on what's on that risk registry? I know you don't have a dedicated IT internal auditor that would really focus on that and test controls in that environment, which may be something you'll look for as additional funding comes up. But in regards to that risk registry, is that something being done? Is internal audit involved? And my recommendation would be that that would be something internal audit would want to have involvement and at least be consulted on going forward to minimize risk and controls and audits that relate to performance areas, hardware asset audits, vulnerability management, patch control audits, to really give the board and the executive team confidence in that we are pursuing in that right direction, or this is an area where we need to bring in some outside help. Could you share anything on that angle?
Jason Getty for the record. I don't know the specific answer to an IT risk registry, but I do know that, as you can see based off the changes that we've made, we are continually assessing the risk on a regular basis and going through to identify new areas of vulnerability, changes to system, and all those pieces. So that is being done, and how technical it's considered a risk registry, I don't know, but a risk assessment is being done on that, which is driving some of these different challenges and changes that we've seen. I think we get back to, and I'm not going to answer for Ms. Scott, but I'm going to give you my perspective, is that we still get back to a limited amount of funding. And IT auditors in general are not cheap anymore. Not that they've ever been cheap. I was on one side, and I remember, billing rates. But IT audits are significantly more expensive. And so it gets back to, again, the risk assessment, which ultimately lays out the risks that we can't necessarily manage, or we are aware of that we need help with, and those costs. And so it's a continual discussion about how to use those resources. And also, what we're trying to focus on right now is really what I'm going to call the preventative upfront side of doing a lot of the blocking and tackling, because if we don't do that first, you're going to waste a lot of money on an IT auditor coming and telling you didn't do the blocking and tackling, and they're not going to worry about the other stuff because they're not going to have time. So we're going to try and get some of that stuff done before we really started thinking, I think, seriously about augmenting the resources. So it's certainly something we are thinking about. We're not quite there yet, and I think we've got some basic components to make sure we nail down through our internal processes first.
Mr. Thornberry, Jeanette Scott for the record. So to answer the second part of that question, up to this date, no, really, we haven't had those kinds of discussions with the IT department because we just don't have that expertise. IT is always part of our risk assessment. I do interviews, I do questionnaires, and they will be again this year, and we will address those issues and try to deal with them as best we can with what we have.
Thank you. And the final follow-up question is, looking at that GASB standard, the 102, is incorporating and into the audit and environment, is looking at, what could potentially, you have a dedicated revenue of taxes and bonds that fund a lot of the program, so you're not, critical in like a private sector company where everyone pulls out and stops buying your product. But thinking as you're looking into those material events and how they can impact is, what would be some of those, and maybe once a year having those interjected, a cybersecurity event, and maybe doing some tabletops and preventive stuff with the executive team and IT team, a physical security event that, parents wouldn't want to send their students here and pull everyone out of the school district. That could, what situations would that be? And do we have the proper controls, and have we tested them in that environment? And I know those types of audits would be very labor intensive in terms of planning and field work, but they go outside of the box. But when they occur, of traditional audits that are looking at financial and accounting records and doing cash control, but that would provide that independent assurance that someone other than the department responsible, so like physical security or school police, public safety, do we have independent people looking at that? Cyber, other than your IT folks, are there other people adding to those conversations with the experience obviously needed to add value to those conversations? But overall, I would say that the plan for internal controls that was presented is comprehensive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Member Binder. I'm only bringing this up because it's on our spreadsheet, and I actually was reached out to by an educator a few days ago asking if I was aware of how upset our educators were that they were having to utilize their own private phones for that two-factor authentication. And so I'll just ask out loud, and I'm not sure you guys have the answer, if there has been an alternative way that they can do the two-factor authentication without utilizing their personal device.
So Jason Getty, for the record, I do know the IT team is aware of the concern and are looking at other ways that multi-factor authentication can be processed. So I know that it's available, and I think they have communicated some out to individuals or to the groups as of now, and continue to work on that.
Awesome, great, thank you. And then I'm just gonna ask because I know that the majority of people in the room or listening did not tune in to the legislative meeting where they passed the bill for the Legislative Council audit. And so could you just elaborate really quick on what they passed and moving forward with that, and how that may affect any accounting hours that we will be discussing at future meetings?
So Jason Gowdy, for the record, so there was a bill, I don't remember the number, that essentially provided for LCB to provide or to perform audits in a very general sense of school districts within the state. They have started with us, not shockingly. They have started with Washoe, not shockingly, right? The two largest. And then they also will rotate through some of the smaller ones, which obviously would, in general, take less time. We've communicated that this is probably going to be at least a 3-year process, which is why I mentioned, and I don't know yet, but I'm assuming and hoping that we would have some interim progress reports for two reasons. One is if they identify an issue that we're unaware of, if they waited 3 years to tell us, that's 3 more years of errors. So we're going to work with them on trying to get at least some interim information, and we'll update this group as we do get that, but I'm unsure. And so they will be going through an audit, and essentially it's really an audit of the operation in totality. So it's not the same sort of financial audit that you'll see from Eide Bailey. They're not going to be going through our financial statements. It's more control-based, operational-based. It includes areas related to recruiting. It includes areas related to academic performance and things of that nature. So it'll be very, very broad. From what I recall, the team mentioned that there was an LCB audit a decade or so ago which is probably, Yeah, I would say at least a decade, right? So I don't know, I wasn't here. But it'll probably be very similar, which there was a lot of operational components to it. So we will continue to update the board and this committee as we get more information. They have been out. I've been interviewed, and they've been through a lot of the preliminary steps, I would say. And then, obviously, given the size and the depth of this, as I mentioned, it'll be at least 3 years until we get a final report on it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that. So yes, it has been just over 20 years since we've had one done. I know that I was I advocated very much for that audit, and that was mainly because of the findings from the 2000, which, as Mr. Gowdy just said, they were really operational in nature. They pointed out, they actually had some positive things to say, but then they also had recommendations on how to better operations as well. So I look forward to any of those updates and a final report. Once again, not within an American instant gratification timeframe. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Binder. One quick comment from me. On page 3 of 14, Mr. Gowdy pointed out that the district forms its internal control foundation using the COSO 2013 framework, which for everyone's benefit would be considered the gold standard for large organizations in this country and around the world. So I applaud the district for continuing to adhere to that standard, and also echo his sentiment that few changes in internal controls is generally a good thing. So kudos. With that in mind, agenda item 2.05 also requires this committee's action, so I'll seek a motion on review of the Clark County School District internal control environment.
Member Thornberry, motion to approve.
Member Binder, I'll second.
Thank you, members. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, please say no. Okay, thank you all. The ayes take that 4-0. With that, we'll move on to agenda item 2.06, which is review of the independence and qualifications of the Clark County School District's independent external auditor. This will be the discussion and possible action regarding the independence of the Clark County School District's external auditor, Eide Bailey LLP, the rotation of the audit partner, and the qualifications and experience of the senior members of the external engagement audit team. Again, I'll turn over to Mr. Jason Gowdy.
Great, Jason Gowdy for the record. Just looking for reference materials. There we go. Thank you, Jason Gowdy for the record. So we do have Eide Bailey with us today. And so the first item, making sure I know which one I'm doing here, sorry. 26. So, yes, so the independence and qualifications, so submitted as reference materials, again, are very similar letters that have been provided by Eide Bailey to the audit committee to discuss both independence and qualifications, and those are in reference 2.06. As I mentioned in the previous presentation, Eide Bailey is a nationally recognized certified public accounting firm, independent auditors, has also been the primary auditor for the Clark County School District for a significant number of years. I know that may give some concern to members of the public and others as well. But being an auditor myself for well over a decade with large firms, it is very standard practice, and the firms do have processes in place to ensure that different members of the firm are reviewing the financial statements and operations of the district so that it's not one person doing it the entire time. Our firm is required to have a second concurring partner, given the significance of our operation, which they do rotate. Most recently, we did have a change in our primary partner as well. And so with that, I think those are the primary components of what's there. I'll open it up to any questions as related to the materials provided in 2.06.
Are there any questions from the member of the Audit Advisory Committee in regards to agenda item 2.06? Ms. Binder.
Just one because, thank you, Mr. Chair. We did rotate partners last year, and so our agenda notes that we potentially are rotating the audit partner again this year, and I'm just curious why, because I don't think there's, unless I'm reading it wrong, but it's right there, the rotation of audit partners.
Jason Gowdy, for the record, our auditors are here, but I believe that was just to speak about the rotation and not expecting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, okay. 'Cause
I wasn't made
saying-
aware, and I didn't think so. So no, I think it's just on there because one of the concerns in prior meetings was about the rotation, and we wanted to be clear that we addressed that component to it. So yes.
Okay, thank you, because I was about to get really sad. So thank you.
Member Thornberry, I'll make a motion to approve.
Member Hilton, second.
Thank you, members. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, please say no. Thank you. The ayes will take it 4-0. Wonderful. With that, we'll move on to agenda item 2.07, which is review the engagement of the independent external auditor for the Clark County School District for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024. This item will be discussion and possible action regarding the engagement of the Clark County School District's independent external auditor, Eide Bailey LLP, for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2024. Mr. Jason Gowdy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jason Gowdy for the record. So this is item 2.07, review of the engagement of the independent external auditor. So we have gone through and received an updated engagement letter from Eide Bailey. There were increases in costs that you'll note, not unanticipated. And so given the way the world has gone over the last few years, the shortage of teachers we're well aware of nationwide. The shortage of accountants is essentially just as drastic, and we've seen the industry change quite a bit. And so we had discussions with our audit firm. We reviewed the number of hours that are required based off what the agreement was made several years ago. As you've seen, there are a number of new GASBs, and it seems like none of the new GASBs are easy. And so that requires not only more hours from our staff, but more hours from our auditors, as well as the fact that, as I mentioned, the constraint on accounting resources is severe. And that obviously puts a cost perspective as it relates to. So we've reviewed this. We have looked at prior RFPs, and we believe that these are fair and appropriate. And we believe that we will continue to work with Eide on reducing hours as appropriate, with more things that we can do, et cetera. But at this point, I'll turn it over for any questions as it relates to the services or the engagement letter, and address them.
Thank you, Mr. Gowdy. Do you happen to recall what last year's audit fee was? Sure. Okay.
So $217,000 in totality, which is inclusive of the single audit.
Okay.
Which is
Thank
right
you.
around what I thought, but I didn't want to answer since I know people know the
Gotcha.
answer.
And Mr. Gowdy, we speak about this every year, so it might seem like deja vu. Because the audit fee, and I'm going to do some quick math, it could be very wrong, went up in the 20-ish% range, and you were speaking about RFPs. Could you remind the committee, how often does the district go to formal RFP for this audit engagement?
we don't have a set time frame. So when just from my prior experiences in the world, I think that it's a 3 to 5 year rotation on RFPs, depending, and these are the significant components, our banking relationships, our auditing relationships. And so, you know, from an auditing perspective, I put that more on no more than every 5 years. Again, there is rarely a change in an auditor without there being something not good happening, either on the audit side or on the client side. And so it is a very challenging and painful process. And so unless there's overwhelming reasons, you don't go through that. And again, there's no need to go through an RFP process every couple of years and put everybody through the pain and torture on both sides. Because what that tends to do is you get less good proposals when they're trying to propose every couple of years and keep not getting it. So we don't have it set. My goal is somewhere around every 5 years-ish would be the objective for this engagement.
Thank you, Mr. Gowdy. And I do acknowledge that for the size and scope of the audit fees are certainly within the realm of reasonability, but worthy of continuing to challenge that analysis. So I appreciate your candor. Are there any other questions in regards to the engagement letter by the Audit Advisory Committee?
Member Binder, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is my 3rd year on, and the last time there was an RFP was the year prior to my appointment on this committee. So if I'm remembering correctly, next year would be about that 5-year goal, for the record. The only thing that I can absolutely say historically that I think I've mentioned before was just a notation from Senator Dennis a couple years ago when the state re-engaged Ida Bailey, was just that they were hopeful that they would diversify their employees compared to some of the other firms that had responded to the state's RFP. They were the least diverse work group. And so I just, you know, that forever sticks in my mind as, you know, we move forward with making sure that we're contracting with companies that have DEI goals and whatnot. And then, so I just want to say that for the record. But then also, I believe last year, I don't think that the partner, Mr. Schlicker, received adequate time to talk to us and introduce himself. And so I would ask Mr. Chair if we could have that happen this time.
Ms. Binder, I think that's a wonderful idea. Assuming I'm not breaking any rules, could Mr. Schlicker come and introduce himself briefly at the behest of the committee and expand on his wonderful resume we see in the attachments?
Thank you, Kurt Schlicker, audit partner with Ide Bailey, for the record. Thank you for inviting me up here to introduce myself. I lead Ide Bailey's government practice in our, what we call the Pacific region. So I kind of help and develop that. I'm part of our executive committee meeting, our government executive committee, and I also am the chair of our single audit technical issues committee. And just to give you a little bit of background on that, our single audit technical issues committee is made up of 6 professionals within the firm. We have over 3,000, so we whittled that 3,000 down to 6 who specialize in federal grant compliance. And then we review all the standards, regulations, and drive our firm practice with respect to grant compliance. You had in front of you in the previous reference materials a list of just some of my clients. Those are just audit clients in Nevada and don't include numerous other clients that I work on and consult with. 100% of my time is in government. I don't audit nonprofits. I don't audit casinos. I don't audit commercial companies. It's 100% focused on governments. and then obviously with the concentration here in Nevada. I am the state of Nevada auditor. We were also just recently awarded the NSHE audit, so I'm NSHE's auditor as well. So school district. So that, again, is just a little bit of my background, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Schlicker. Any questions for Mr. Schlicker in regards to his engagement? Okay, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. So members of the committee, item 2.07 does indeed also require our action. So can I please seek a motion on the engagement of Eide Bailly as the district's independent external auditor?
Member Binder, I'd like to move to approve agenda item 2.07 for the review and engagement for the independent external auditor for the fiscal year end June 30th, 2024.
Second, Member Thornberry.
Thank you, members. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, please say no. Thank you. The ayes will have it, 4-0. With that, we will move on to agenda item 2.08, which is the review of the travel by district employees, regulation, and policies. This will be a discussion on travel by district employees, regulation, and policies. With that, I'll turn over to Mr. Gowdy.
Thank you, Jason Gowdy, for the record. So we've included as reference material Regulation 34 or 3511, which talks about travel by district employees. So I'm going to start with the fact that this discussion probably stems from recruiting trips that were in the news. And so I'll start with addressing that piece of it. So as we engaged in recruiting, and then were subsequently reported in the news, especially related to the Miami trip, which was less than fruitful, we underwent numerous requests for information publicly, and we also reviewed the components of travel as it relates to our own internal policies, regulations, et cetera. And so this specific instance was not a travel issue as it relates to control perspectives. All travel regulations, policies, and procedures were followed. No violations under the grant status of the funding were noted in the review. And so what I believe this was a recruiting trip that did not, I guess, bear the fruit of the labors. And so that's a separate component as you think about how we manage recruiting trips. But that's something that the district will continue to address, because recruiting teachers is one of the most critical things that we're going to do. And if you don't start to do things that weren't done in the past that may not bear all the fruit at the beginning, you're probably never going to have a shot, right? And this wasn't necessarily a shot in the dark. As we're all aware in the news, Florida had significant challenges as it related to teachers and some of the legislation that were passed in that area. And so therefore, when you think about some options and some opportunities, there are some there. And certainly I'm not going to opine on the recruiting status, because that's not in my purview or in my expertise, but you certainly see some of those components. So with all that said, that's the background. We continually look at policies and procedures, some more often than not, and this obviously gave us an opportunity to go back and look at it. And so we are looking at our policies, procedures, processes, and what I'm going to say is we're looking at tightening them up and clarifying a little bit. I do not anticipate any significant changes. We are a very conservative environment. As such, I've recently gotten questions from people as to why we do not allow employees to utilize P cards for meals while they're traveling versus having to submit and get per diems. It's a very conservative way to do it. P cards, we don't have a tremendous amount of travel as you think about an organization of our size. A lot of smaller organizations travel significantly more, so it's not a huge amount of money, but there are necessary trips from a recruiting perspective and training perspective. And so we take a very conservative approach. A lot of what the clarifications are going to be around are really talking about the approval process and any changes subsequent to that approval process and ensuring that those are tightly monitored. Anytime that there's something other than any sort of personal travel that may be allowed under policy or regulation that is tied to that, ensuring that all of the documentation is obtained up front and things are separated completely. Again, we looked at that. There was no violations here. But again, when we looked at it, some of the people that were new to the policy had some questions. And so most of what we're talking about is clarification. Adding some glossaries for the types of reimbursable and unreimbursable. A little bit tightened up process for mileage. Talking about pre and post event type expenditures, we have language in there that on travel days you get half a per diem and things of that nature, which is very standard in the governmental, and it lines up with our governmental standards. But it's somewhat challenging on how we do that, and so we're going to clean up some of that language as well. And then provide some training and try and make it a little bit more visual, a little easier rather than reading through a 20-page document of all the different processes and then adding in some summary pieces. So that's where we are. I wanted to address what I believe is the ultimate component, which is the recruiting and whether that truly related to the travel issue. It did not. It really relates to recruiting and that planning and how you get responses there. But I did want to acknowledge the fact that it did give us an opportunity to look at this and have some other people review, which provided some different insights. And so we will be addressing those through changes in policy regulation possibly, but certainly more in some of the detailed procedures and how we review these as well.
Thank you, Mr. Gowdy. Appreciate the update. Are there any questions for Mr. Gowdy in regards to agenda item 208?
Member Thornberry, I would concur. Conservative policy approach, very more flexible and liberal in the corporate, in private environment. So definitely supportive of the policy and the direction. And then, with that, you can't create a policy to create common sense. And you look at it's just perception. I think the Florida trips, I believe there was one to Hawaii. You on face value is, you look and like, the government employees went to Florida, Miami Beach, or they went to Hawaii. Keeping in mind Las Vegas has a significant Hawaiian population here, so recruiting those that have an interest in education, it wouldn't be unrealistic in going to Hawaii. And as you pointed out with the environment within public education in Florida, capitalizing that on that here in Nevada to have folks that may want to teach in a different environment, capitalizing on that. It's just, the perception and maybe, incorporating, not sure how to put that into policy, is that when you're traveling to those places, maybe I don't want to name any companies of hotel chains, but, using common sense to say, okay, maybe we shouldn't stay on a direct oceanfront room on the beach, be a little bit more conservative. But, sometimes that may be the best deal. And so, there's always that balancing perspective, the perception versus reality. But I think in terms of a travel policy, this is conservative in the right direction for the district.
Thank you, Member Thornberry. I'd like to echo some of Joe's comments, and I appreciate your candor as always, Mr. Gowdy, in regards to this. Obviously, I think he stated it well. Continuing to manage what I would characterize as a reputational risk is obviously, I know it's first and foremost, it's a challenging environment. So I appreciate your candor in addressing that. And obviously agreed, the policy is conservative. I appreciate, again, the opportunity to continue to create more granularity and robustness where necessary. We certainly do look forward to seeing the next iteration of this at a future meeting. So again, thank you so much for your candor and time on that, Mr. Gowdy. Any other questions from the committee? Ms. Binder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Member Binder. So, right, I'll echo both of that. So when I looked at this, and having worked in not just accounts payable, but at auditing in my career path, even though in private sector, I did find that this regulation and policy was really void of responsibility. And so are we going to see a draft back before it goes to the board, or does it go back to the board?
So Jason Gowdy, for the record, that would, I guess, technically be at the discretion of the board. And timing, because the regulations and policies as written are broad. They are not granular. They are not intended to be granular because they are just that, large district regulations and policies. And then really how we then apply those in a procedural perspective and set up what I'll call auditing processes to ensure compliance and things of that nature, and providing guidance to employees as it relates to the documents when they have travel documents. So that's where I think a lot more of the granularity and changes will be. But at this time, we were not planning on it. But again, it would be at the discretion of the board based off when we're ready to issue this, as well as the next meeting, and if that's the board's wish.
Okay, thank you for that. Because, I mean, I understand we have an environment to discuss this and what happened. And so in the homework that I did, and I thought we were going to be asked what changes we would like to see. So I guess I'll just put on the record, definitely that accountability. So if you go over to the state, who is also taxpayer funded, you can just do a simple Google search of their policy and procedure for travel and their regulations. But something that really stuck out to me between this policy and that one is that responsibility factor. There's a very clear section of very itemized things that are the responsibility of the employee, responsibilities of the supervisor, and then responsibilities of, I guess in this case would be like the executive cabinet member or the superintendent. Because with what happened with those recruitment trips, in our existing policy, travel outside of the continental U.S. would have required the superintendent's direct authorization. And that's something that I haven't really seen a clear answer on of whether he did give that or not. But again, noting that recruitment efforts are a total different arena than we are. But however, being good stewards of public money, I would also like to see language in there that, that any of those travel expenses should be the cheapest available, not to mention like any particular hotels or motels. But, when we're utilizing, whether it's grant funds or from our strategic budget, general budget, strategic budget, whatever, that if people are traveling, that it should be within reason and be respectful. So those are some of my little notes on that, because I really, at the end of the day, when things like this happen, not just protecting our outward image, which is forever hard to do, but when things happen, who do we hold responsible? And if we're, if this happens again, hopefully not, or something like it, is our policy as written compliant with Nevada Administration Code, NRS? This particular policy hasn't even been revised since 2009, and we're in 2024. So, right, we're going to see some updates to it. And then, so again, I think in the future, I would just be looking to make sure that if anything were to happen, that the appropriate people would be held responsible.
And Member Thornberry, quick question for our CFO is, in terms of employees booking the vacations, does the district have again for some systems that I'm familiar with, Concor, or there's travel systems that have the district's budget approval authorization limits, it's all automated, so you can't just go book your own travel. Is there like a travel website that employees use, or is there not enough to really support that in the environment?
So Jason Getty for the record, yeah, I mean, given our size, given our budget, the amount of travel we do is minuscule. It is for recruiting, training. Those are the primary two components that we do, and they're very limited. Certainly the conferences and different components are broad across the nation as well, depending on where they're held. But we don't. But we certainly have, in the processes and in the employee documents to when they're booking things, there are instructions basically that talk about, obviously booking the lowest cost flight, and getting back to the point about, lowest cost, it's very hard to write a travel policy around lowest cost. It's not the right answer. And so we use kind of the same language that every organization in the company does, right, or in the country does, or world, is that it's, you do have to have a common sense, but that's got to be supervisory review, because sometimes you might be staying at one of those hotels you don't want to name, because that's where the conference is, and it actually might be cheaper with a conference discount, as well as the fact that the next closest hotel is 30 miles away, which requires travel, et cetera, right? So there's a lot of consideration. So it does get down to supervision, proper supervision. I agree with accountability. I don't know if this is the right place for us to put accountability because of the EMR components to it, so I'll discuss that with Chris and HR. I agree. I think we have language in our collective bargaining agreements, as well as some of the other components that talk about violation of policy and procedure. So it may be covered, but I will talk to them about those pieces because I agree. I think that the only way you technically change processes and behaviors on this is proper accountability. As you talk about, does this happen again? How this regulation might affect that? I don't think it will at all. This process, the perception issue, had nothing to do with lapses in controls nor inadequate controls. It was the fact that there was a recruiting trip and multiple recruiting trips, and I'm primarily focusing on Miami because that was a newer, not the only time we've gone there, but it was less fruitful and more people went. And again, that gets back to a process component on the recruiting level as to how we can better manage that. Because again, we are going to have to spend dollars on recruiting. There's no way not to do it. If not, we're not going to have teachers. And so, the Hawaii trip, again, it always looks and is perceived as if they go into Hawaii and you're in beachfront. If you've been to Hawaii, there's almost nothing that's not beachfront, right? Additionally, Hawaii is one school district for the entire state. And if you look at cost of living adjusted wages for the average or starting teacher pay compared to ours, it is drastically lower, right? So we have a huge Hawaiian population, and cost of living adjusted wages are significantly higher here. It seems like a good place to be going. Again, not my world, but again, it's the perception. And so I think that one is it's communication, that ensuring we're addressing the perception piece, but also ensuring compliance, which I think we certainly were in this instance.
Thank you, Mr. Gotti and members. Agenda item 2.08 does not require action, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to agenda item 3.01. This is public comment on items not listed as action items on this agenda. Public comments during this portion of the agenda is offered for individuals wishing to speak on matters within the jurisdiction of the board, but not listed as an action item on the agenda. Each individual wishing to speak during this period will be given 3 minutes to address the committee. The public should be aware that the committee is unable by law to deliberate or take action on items not listed on this agenda. In an effort to be fair and consistent, committee members will refrain from addressing individual public comments. With that in mind, we have one member of the public who wishes to speak. It is Mr. David Gomez II. I invite you, Mr. Gomez, to approach, and we'll start your 3 minutes when you get up here. Thank you, Mr. Gomez.
There it goes, by itself. David Gomez, for the record, Nevada Peace Alliance president. You know, I was reading some of these regulations, and there was one adopted regulation that particularly applies to Mr. Jason here. And it's Regulation 3110. It was proposed in 1963, and then it was amended in 2011. I think we need to revisit that and go through some of those things, because when you have something that was amended, and you got to really question on how amendments work, because I was on AZAC and we had to really go through, I think it was Regulation 711111, I believe it was, and we had to rewrite that whole thing and figure out exactly what applies to today versus what applied then. A whole different Clark County from then to now. But I still want to know what in the heck happened to those $99 mirrors. I know it's a long going thing, and I'm gonna beat the dead horse until it's no longer alive. But I want to know how they utilize those mirrors. Those mirrors, with police services, are utilizing them for sweeps, because I do DHS training, I do FEMA training, I do a whole bunch of different types of training for different types of sweeps and assets of issues that could be damaged. I don't want to get into details on that, but nevertheless, you know, some of these regulations are out of date and they need to be updated. And I know that Mr. Gordy here can do those type of things because he's the CFO and also the proposed assistant superintendent by the Prince of Alibaba. But, you know, it's kind of weird, you know, I'm looking at some of these things, and we just got to revisit some of these regulations and go through them and figure out exactly how they're going to be implemented and how they're going to be put together. And we don't always need district employees to come in and implement it. We need people from the public to come in as well and implement some of these regulations that you guys apply, that applies to you guys. And, you know, I see I've been working on these boards for a long time. I am the inaugurated bridge commissioner of Clark County School District. And I'm not here at that capacity. Neither would I ever, because I'm there to help for parents and principals and everyone, there to be that bridge. But, you know, I see a lot of sour faces, like you guys really don't want to be here. And it's like, okay, this is either a passion or it's not, or it's just a voluntary step to get somewhere else. You know, if you don't like the job, I mean, you don't like doing it, I'm not saying you have to smile every 3 seconds, but it just looks like you guys have to, you know, change your face to, you know, understanding is more comprehensive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez. Okay, with that, I thank everyone who attended today, members of the committee. I look forward to seeing you all in the July timeframe. But before we say goodbye, can I please have a motion to adjourn today's meeting?
Member Thornberry, motion to adjourn.
Member Binder, I'll second.
Thank you, members. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, please say no. Wonderful. Have a great afternoon, everybody.